If ever there was an artist in Europe who resisted fascism, Adolf Busch was the one. Adolf Busch was certainly up there with Toscanini in refusing to cooperate with the Nazis and the fascists. And in this video we'll see how he resisted Nazism and fascism and spoke out against it as well. And for this video I'm very grateful to the information that's available online at www.marlboroughmusic.org, which contains loads of useful information about Adolf Busch, and we'll come back to Marlborough Music and its links to Adolf Busch later on in this video. Adolf Busch was born in 1891 and died in 1952. He was an all-round musician and a moral beacon in troubled times, a prominent German violinist and conductor, and also a composer. He was celebrated for his contributions to classical music during the early to mid-20th century. The most successful part of his career was when he was in Germany and Europe, and he had a somewhat less successful second phase of his life in the United States. He was a man of great musical and personal integrity. Although he was not Jewish himself, when Hitler came into power in 1933, he moved to Basel, Switzerland, and refused to perform in Germany, even when the Nazis begged him to return. One of his greatest friends and collaborators was a Jew. That, of course, was Rudolf Serkin. And in fact, Serkin eventually became Adolf Busch's son-in-law. Adolf Busch was described as a great classical interpreter who had poise, humanity, and who placed artistic integrity above career development. Unfortunately, he shared his first name with another German, Austrian man we've all heard of, and that's where he came into conflict with the regime. In April 1933, he immolated the most lucrative part of his career rather than play for Hitler, who called him our German violinist. He loved Italian music and was widely popular in Italy until he lost patience with Mussolini. On the 1st of April 1933, he repudiated Germany altogether. So that's very early on in the regime. And in 1938, he boycotted Italy. In 1933, Thomas Mann characterized Adolf Busch as an extraordinarily appealing person, strongly opposed to the Hitler nonsense, in exile from Germany and yet the German violinist, very comforting, a kindred spirit. Indeed, Busch despised the Nazis so profoundly that he issued a resolute public statement in April of 1933 that declared, "Because of the impression made on me by the actions of my Christian compatriots against German Jews, I find it necessary to break off my concert tour in Germany." In 1937, when the Nazi government tried to induce Busch to return, he said, "If you hang Hitler in the middle, with Goering on the left and Goebbels on the right, I'll return to Germany." He would eventually keep that promise, but after 1945. Now, thanks to the Strad magazine, we have a quick chronology of Busch's life. In 1891, he was born in Siegen, Westphalia. In 1902, he entered the Cologne Conservatoire. In 1910 was the start of his solo career and his Berlin debut. In 1912, he moved to Vienna and founded a quartet. In 1918, he took over the Berlin Hochschule Masterclass. In 1931, he toured with Toscanini in America. From 1933 onwards, he refused to play in Hitler's Germany. In 1935, he formed the Busch Chamber Players. In 1939, he emigrated to America. In 1950, he founded the Marlborough Summer School, Vermont. Remember that website that we quoted at the start of the video? In 1952, he died in Guilford, Vermont, USA. Let's go through Adolf Busch's bio in some more detail then, shall we? Adolf Georg Wilhelm Busch was born in Siegen, Westphalia on the 8th of August 1891. Siegen is a small city in the southwest corner of Germany's Westphalia region that is home to some 18,000 residents and a blossoming industrialized economy. His father, Wilhelm Busch, initially a cabinet maker, became a noted luthier. His mother, Catherine Henrietta, owned and operated a handicrafts shop. Money was tight in the Busch household, but creativity was nurtured nonetheless. He began playing a violin made especially for him by his father when he was 3 or maybe even 2.5, showing exceptional talent, and was virtually self-taught until the age of 10 or 11. Apparently his father was already making him his miniature violin before he even took his first steps. His father taught him the basics when he was very small. In 1895, the 4-year-old Adolf Busch performed his first public concert, accompanied by his older brother Fritz at the keyboard. Adolf earned a round of applause, a brief mention in the local paper, and more to his taste, a fee of 2 frankfurters and a glass of milk. Fritz and Adolf continued their duet routine throughout their childhood with impromptu busking to their parents' chagrin, and as well as formal concerts. Then he had lessons from Wilhelm Grumer, a pupil of Hans Zitt, and Heinrich Anders, a Gustav Holländer pupil. In 1902 he entered the Cologne Conservatoire, where he was taught for a year by Willy Hess, a Joachim protégé who favoured the old-fashioned low bow arm. He was then mentored for 6 years by another Joachim disciple, the Dutchman Bram Eldering, who handled the bow in a much freer fashion. Adolf Busch studied music in Cologne with Professor Fritz Steinbach, who was, in fact, his composition teacher. Steinbach had maintained a musical and social association with Johannes Brahms. Adolf Busch also learned much from his future father-in-law, Hugo Grüters, who was a German conductor in Bonn. Throughout his career, Busch decided to use the old German bowhold, which required tremendous strength in the right-hand fingers, but enabled him to execute his legendary long bow strokes. Colleagues attested that he could make both ends of the bow sound the same. Because he was regarded equally highly as a composer and violinist, he often appeared in both guises in the same concert. Busch was allowed to develop naturally and did not graduate until 1909, by which time the slightly younger Joseph Szigeti had been on the circuit for 4 years. Busch was a protégé of Max Reger, who he had high respect for. A successful 1909 performance of Max Reger's Violin Concerto in A major, accompanied by his brother Fritz, for Reger himself, was given. In a letter to his wife Elsa, Reger wrote, "Early today, a 16-year-old brat played me my concerto here by heart, perfectly beautiful in tone, technique, etc. Isn't that marvellous?" Thus began a friendship that significantly influenced Adolf's compositional development. In 1912, Reger dedicated his Prelude and Fugue in D minor for solo violin, opus 117, number 6, to Adolf. And he became concertmaster of the Vienna Concertverein, aged 20. In 1912, Busch founded the Vienna Concertverein Quartet, which made its debut at the 1913 Salzburg Festival. Adolf was first violin, Fritz Rothschild second violin, Karl Doctor on viola, and Paul Grumer on the cello. Their debut at the 1913 Salzburg Festival was warmly received, with critics likening the group to the Joachim Quartet, one of Europe's finest and best-known ensembles. He also gained recognition as a concerto soloist, and performed with the Gürzenich Quartet on a viola made by his father. Adolf's romance with his composition teacher's daughter, Frieda Grüters, grew and blossomed. By 1909, the pair of then teenagers decided to marry once Adolf was professionally established, but Hugo Grüters forbade the engagement on account of the couple's youth and naivety. Nonetheless, Frieda's best friend, Hannah Zorn, conveyed messages for the young couple as they courted secretly. Adolf and Frieda were eventually married on May 15th, 1913, after years of covert love letters and serenades. The Grüters family threw them a thoroughly musical party in Bonn, which included Bach arias performed by the happy couple, as well as a duet arrangement of Mendelssohn's Wedding March performed by pianist and noted music theorist Donald Francis Tovey, and the father of the bride. And then in 1918, Busch was appointed professor at the Musikhochschule in Berlin and founded the legendary Busch Quartet after World War I in Berlin. His duo partners included Rudolf Serkin, among others. Due to a tuberculosis diagnosis that happened during the 1910s, Adolf and Frieda spent time in a sanitarium in the alpine village of Arosa, Switzerland, in order to improve his health. The sanatorium's physician, Dr. Wolfgang Römisch, was a music connoisseur. His wife, Käthe, was in fact a student of Clara Schumann. And many patients and visitors that went to the sanatorium were musically inclined. There was an abundance of chamber music played amongst family and friends each evening after dinner. In the midst of this period, Adolf's mentor and friend, Max Reger, died in 1916 at the age of 43. Adolf Busch felt the loss of his friend Max Reger acutely. Reger had been a font of inspiration for the young composer's style, but happier times ensued the following summer when Adolf and Frieda welcomed a daughter, Irene, on June the 21st, 1917. In 1922, Adolf Busch departed Berlin and his position at the Hochschule, and instead they established a residence in Darmstadt, though touring and travelling prevented them from truly settling down there. In 1927, the family were back in Switzerland, where they relocated to Basel. A number of friends and new pupils resided nearby or with them, including a young Yehudi Menuhin who came to study with Busch. Forbidden by the Nazis to perform with Rudolf Serkin, his Jewish son-in-law, Busch moved to Switzerland, then England, and finally to the United States, where in 1950 he co-founded the Marlborough Music Festival in Marlborough, Vermont. He was a Swiss citizen from 1935, and from 1926 to 1939 he worked in Basel and founded his own chamber orchestra, spending 12 years in total in Basel. In January 1933, Serkin and Busch were interrupted during a performance in Stuttgart, where an audience member stood to give the Nazi salute. Busch, with his legendary temper, stopped mid-performance and shouted at the man to put his arm down. The Busch Quartet played their final concert in Germany on April the 1st. They were so disgusted by the Juden boycott of all Jewish-owned businesses, that they vowed never to perform in Germany again while the country was under Nazi rule. In the years since Rudolf Serkin first came to play with the Busches in Germany, Adolf's daughter Irene had grown up and become Rudy's devoted partner, and the two were married in 1935. In 1938, Adolf and the Busch Quartet withdrew from all performances in Austria and Italy. They'd already withdrawn from Germany to protest anti-Semitism. Adolf co-founded the Lucerne Festival in Switzerland in 1938 with his brother Fritz and friend Arturo Toscanini. Toscanini was also boycotting Germany and Italy's fascist regimes. And the Busch Quartet members served as section leaders in the festival's orchestra. In 1939, the Busch Quartet toured the United States, and that included a performance at Carnegie Hall. He settled in New York, and he and the Busch Quartet found engagements throughout the country. However, Adolf suffered a heart attack in the same year, curtailing performances into 1941. Rudolf Serkin began to gain popularity in the United States, but Adolf Busch was not as readily embraced by American audiences. He also was steadfast in matters of principle. When one of his American agents insisted that he play more virtuosic repertoire, saying, "There's gold lying on the ground, all you have to do is pick it up," Adolf replied, "I don't bend," and he remained committed to his ideals. That may also partly explain why his career didn't completely take off in the USA. His wife Frieda Busch was sadly diagnosed with cancer, and her health also began to decline. In 1945, the Serkins, who were otherwise based in New York City, purchased land in southeastern Vermont, an area whose rolling hills and countryside elicited fond memories of Austria and the Vienna woods, and of their later pre-war lives in Switzerland. Adolf spent all his free time there at Frieda's bedside. Adolf Busch said, "My poor wife is suffering a great deal, and we are all suffering with her," as he wrote to Alexander Schneider in 1946. Later that year, Frieda died. Busch returned to Germany in 1947, and in 1949 gave his first concert there since the start of the war. He also married Hedwig Vischer, a medical doctor whose personal charm, sincerity, and inner strength vivified him. He found comfort and joy in Hedwig's companionship and a new happiness and freedom. "Thanks to Hedwig, my life makes sense again," he said. The couple welcomed sons Nikolaus, Ragnar, and Thomas in 1948 and 1950. In 1948, still enamoured with the farm that the Serkins had purchased, Adolf bought 77 acres of land in the southern Vermont town of Guilford. It was there that he would resume his love of playing chamber music with artists of diverse ages, nationalities and perspectives. At nearby Marlborough College, Adolf and Rudy encouraged President Walter Hendricks to hire their colleagues, the great French flautist Marcel Moyser, Marcel's son Louis, and his daughter-in-law Blanche, to establish a music department. During the summer of 1950, under the aegis of the college, Adolf, Rudy, Hermann Busch, the Moyses, and half a dozen students participated in workshops and performances on the rural campus that became a prelude to what was to come. In 1951, Adolf, Rudy, Hermann and the Moyses incorporated their sessions as a new organisation, the Marlborough School of Music. Adolf Busch also coached chamber ensembles at the Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia, where Rudy also taught on a monthly basis. He completed his final composition, the Sixth Psalm, for choir, orchestra and organ, Opus 70, just days before his death from a heart attack on June 9th, 1952 in Guilford, Vermont. He felt compelled to realise this final composition when his brother Fritz died in 1951. His brother Fritz Busch was a conductor, and it is inspired by Fauré's Requiem. Adolf's sudden death left his friends dismayed, unmoored, nearly unbelieving. That Adolf Busch is no longer alive is incomprehensible, wrote Rudy Serkin. Our lives were so richly intertwined that to me, the boundaries between death and life now often seem blurred. Although primarily known as a performer, Busch was also a prolific composer in the late Romantic tradition, in style close to Johannes Brahms, Max Reger and Othmar Schoeck. Chamber music works as well as orchestral works, choral symphonies, piano and organ pieces and lieder form the core of his oeuvre. After writing his first symphony at age 16, he continued composing concerti, symphonic and choral works, lieder and music for keyboard throughout the subsequent decades. His prolific and diverse chamber works reflected the variety of musicians by whom he was surrounded, ultimately culminating in some 70 works with opus numbers, though much of his music remains unpublished or otherwise difficult to find. In 1927, during an otherwise busy concert season, Adolf wrote his symphony in E minor while on vacation in the town of Bad Gastein, Austria. Notably, the final movement is inspired by a dream Adolf had in which death appeared to him as a strong, beautiful man and explained to him what nonsense it would be to fetch him now, when he was composing so beautifully and would never do anything better. In 1929, he wrote a concerto for orchestra. At his peak in roughly 1910 through to 1940, Busch was an exciting, even excitable player who held the violin quite high and flat, while exhibiting hangovers from his self-taught childhood, such as a spiky staccato and an individual way of playing rapid runs on the string. He bowed with considerable finesse, and his left hand delivered honest intonation. He never tuned sharp or flat for effect. He was a master of varying vibrato, sometimes using none, mostly employing a finer graded finger vibrato and widening it only for the most romantic music such as Schumann. Like many of his generation, he did not try to vibrate on every note in every fast passage. He liked fast movements to be very fast, slow movements very slow, and he had the means to achieve both extremes, although he was uninterested in technique for its own sake. Busch made a big sound, but it was the pure quality that mesmerized his listeners. He had such a clear mental vision of his objectives that he could freight a simple legato line with the most inward spiritual feeling. His pianissimo was extraordinary. He often seemed possessed by an inner ecstasy that expressed itself solely in sound. Here are his strengths, quoting from the Strad magazine. Exceptional rhythm, the hallmark of Busch's playing, enabled him to exert control over the slowest tempo, while buoying up a faster tempo. Despite a contained, unshowy platform manner, he made direct communication with audiences who sensed his deep humanity. Lively humour was at work, even, or perhaps especially, when he played Beethoven. His singing portamento was instantly recognisable. And the weaknesses? Those big sausagey fingers sometimes got in a tangle, especially in Busch's last decade when heart trouble undermined his playing. Another generational trait was that he avoided the even-numbered positions, even though he used the second position in his Bach editions, and therefore slid more than modern players. His portamento, a strength in romantic music, came to be seen as a weakness in the classical and Baroque fare he played so much. His students included Yehudi Menuhin in Basel, Erika Marini and Steffi Geyer, and other violinists that he assisted were Frederick Grinke, David Nadian, and Gösta Andriessen, a Swedish violinist who became a valued member of the Busch Quartet. If memory serves me correctly, Canadian violinist Frederick Grinke was one of the judges during the diploma performance examination of my violin teacher Ronaldo de Lima, who was performing the Lalo Symphony Espagnole in front of the panel of judges for his diploma. For a good book on the life of Adolf Busch, you can read the book by Tully Potter, an exhaustive 2-volume biography which was published in 2010 by Toccata Press and is entitled Adolf Busch, The Life of an Honest Musician. And who were his family? His father was the instrument maker Wilhelm Busch, his brothers were the conductor Fritz Busch, the cellist Hermann Busch, the actor Willy Busch, and the musician Heinrich Busch. His brother Fritz, born in 1890 and died in 1951, was a piano prodigy and held several important conducting positions after World War I, including music director of the Stuttgart Opera. And of course, Adolf was the father-in-law of the pianist Rudi Serkin and the maternal grandfather of the pianist Peter Serkin and the cellist Judith Serkin. His grandson John Serkin gave some recollections of his grandfather.
My grandfather Adolf Busch didn't die until I had already reached the age of 9, so it surprises me that I don't have more memories of him. One of those memories, though, is as vivid as if it happened yesterday. I must have been 5 or 6 years old. My recollection is that I was lying in my bedroom. Perhaps I was ill. Papa took out his violin and, standing next to my bed, played the entire gavotte from Bach's E major partita. Whenever I hear that movement, I think of that moment and remember clearly his playing of it. I recently read Tully Potter's magnificent, encyclopedic biography of my grandfather, in which he mentioned that the gavotte had been recorded. I was excited to immediately find the performance on YouTube. I had no idea that it existed. From the first notes, it all came back to me. The warm sonority, the phrasing, the lucid articulation, the precise intonation, exactly as I have carried it in my mind for the past 75 years. I found myself with tears in my eyes, full of love for this man whom I thought I hardly knew, and with renewed reverence for his art.
Now we come on to the violins and instruments of Adolf Busch. Although he began his career on a Wilhelm Busch, the violin made by his father, he soon acquired the 1716 Stradivarius that carries his name today. Busch used Stradivari violins, first the 1716 instrument and then the 1732 Wiener. Although he had 2 violins and a viola by Giovanni Battista Guadagnini at various times. For practicing and hotter climates, he used instruments by Fritz Baumgarter of Basel. He had 2 taut bows. His repertoire? Busch is renowned for Bach, Beethoven, Schubert, Brahms, Reger and Busoni, and apparently played more Mozart than any rival. He played 4 concertos by Viotti and also enjoyed his duets. According to some, in Vivaldi's A major sonata, he outplayed even Heifetz and Milstein. He won acclaim in the massive Joachim Hungarian, in Reger, in Elgar and in Spohr. He liked the viola and was admired in his version of Berlioz's Harold in Italy, and usually used the 1731 Paganini Stradivari for that. As a quartet leader, he played a wide if conservative repertoire. Likewise in his sonata duo with Rudolf Serkin. His Beethoven sonatas and quartet cycles are still spoken of. The Busch Quartet recordings need no advertisement. A few more details on the Busch Quartet. From the 1920-21 season, it included Gösta Andriessen on violin, Karl Dotter on viola and Paul Gruner on cello. The ensemble appeared regularly in Vienna and performed throughout Germany, embarking on tours to the Netherlands and Italy. In addition to the works of Beethoven and Mozart, they also championed the music of Reger. The quartet skyrocketed to success. European impresarios paid handsomely to secure the Busch Quartet on their season, knowing that the ensemble had the power to sell out an entire subscription series with a single appearance. Notable fans of this quartet included Albert Einstein and the Pope. The quartet continued in existence with varying personnel until 1951. In 1930, Adolf's brother Hermann replaced Paul Gruner as cellist for the Busch Quartet. And in the 1943 season, after Karl Dotter fell ill, he was replaced by Lotte Hammerschlag, a violist from Vienna. From 1931, the Busch Quartet began a successful and long-standing relationship with the City of London. Among audience members attending his recitals were writers Samuel Beckett, Virginia and Leonard Woolf, and Victor Gollancz, as well as composer Sir Michael Tippett. And he recorded albums under the HMV label at Abbey Road Studios. Busch disliked virtuoso music, preferring pieces such as Schubert's C major Fantasy, which sounded less difficult than they were. In November 2015, Warner Classics released a 16 CD collection of Busch's recordings of Bach, Beethoven, Schubert, Brahms, and other composers. Here are some recommended recordings according to the Strad magazine. Tragically, Busch suffered a fatal heart attack in June of 1952. Rudolf Serkin, who had been taken into Busch's home and mentored when he was just 18, assumed artistic leadership of Marlborough. In conclusion, Adolf Busch was a big man in every way. The epitome of classicism, Europe's busiest violin soloist at one time, and first choice for the Beethoven and Brahms concertos. He was an early pioneer of the modern chamber orchestra, unquestionably the leading German violinist at the time of his exile. But when he immigrated to America, he never recaptured the fame that he enjoyed in the 1920s and 1930s. He did, however, leave a lasting legacy in the New World, co-founding Vermont's Marlborough Music School and Festival with his son-in-law Rudolf Serkin. A person who attended his concerts, Martin Lovett, observed, "What impressed me was that the most difficult passages didn't worry him at all. You never felt anything was difficult. He just played." The Busch Quartet achieved international acclaim for its interpretations of classical composers such as Beethoven and Brahms. The Marlborough Music Festival in Vermont is a significant platform for aspiring chamber musicians. Busch was regarded as a leading figure of the German violin school, known for his clarity of expression and commitment to the composer's intentions in his performances. His legacy includes extensive recordings and a lasting impact on the world of chamber music, cementing his place as one of the leading violinists of his time. Busch once remarked that if he could come back after his death, he would like to return as an organist. Although Busch was not Jewish and was popular in Germany, he firmly opposed Nazism from the beginning. I'd like to conclude with some of Adolf Busch's own words. "The anti-Semitic movement has closed my homeland to me. As a German, I feel so repulsed by what is happening." Unlike many non-Jewish Europeans of the day who turned a blind eye to the hateful policies of the Nazi Party, Adolf Busch was fierce in his denunciation and made his opposition public. To Adolf, such political conscience was a matter of principle, even if it meant risking his career, going into self-imposed exile and damaging his financial prospects. He replied, "Hang Hitler," to the Nazis who inquired about his return, while he sold his second Stradivarius violin to make ends meet. So his reply to Heil Hitler was, "Hang Hitler." And I'm going to end with my thoughts on this beautiful photo of Adolf Busch. What a dashing, handsome young Aryan man he was. The finest kind of German musician who didn't turn his back on the Jews, but stood up to Hitler, a man of great integrity in everyday life, but especially in his music.